Balanced well-being begins with sleep, and our award-winning Doze and Dream formula was created with this in mind. This blend of adaptogens and herbs promotes a well-rested body and mind. I have combined reishi and ashwagandha with chamomile, passion flower, nutmeg, and sea greens. These herbs work synergistically to help you drift off and wake up feeling refreshed. Consistency is key when it comes to adaptogens, so make Doze and Dream part of your evening ritual to nurture good sleep habits and support restorative sleep.
Forget breathwork and cold dips. Orgasms are some of the best medicine for your nervous system. If you are someone who often feels stuck or lacks energy, has a tendency to overthink, to procrastinate, to self-sabotage, or gets kind of really annoyed or thrown off balance by things not going your way in life, a more regulated nervous system could change everything for you. But it's not all about breathwork and cold dips when it comes to regulating your nervous system. There are so many simple regulation tools that are straightforward, they are free, and they are a lot more fun. Hello and welcome to Notes on Vulnerability. My name is Alex and I'm a resilience coach. And it's my job to help you find freedom from the things that are keeping you stuck in life so that you can actually thrive. I work with the mind and the nervous system to help make changing your life really simple and so fucking satisfying. This is season 4 of Notes on Vulnerability, in which you'll find some fantastic interviews with really inspiring people, as well as shorter episodes like this one, which is me kind of sharing the insights and ideas that I think a lot of us would benefit from at the moment. Because if there is anything that I have learned as a resilience coach, it's that we make life so much more difficult than it needs to be. And our nervous systems are one massively underutilized tool for helping with this. So nervous system regulation is something that's getting a hell of a lot of airtime right now. You've probably heard the phrase being kind of bandied around on social media and by lots of wellness people. The nervous system plays a big role in the kind of coaching that I do because it's really difficult to be resilient if your nervous system is constantly booting you into fight, flight, freeze, and you really don't have any way of dealing with that. The main reason this is such a challenge for resilience is because of the destabilizing effect of being in your stress response for too long, which I'll come to in a minute. So the more that we can do to stay regulated in our daily lives, the better. In this episode, I'm going to delve a little bit more into why it's such a good idea to build regulation into your everyday life rather than having it as some kind of habit that you try and force on yourself when you are feeling stressed. I'm also looking at the really rigid thinking about nervous system regulation that makes it feel like yet another thing that you have to add to your to-do list. And also how many easy, simple, straightforward and fun ways there are to regulate your nervous system that are just as effective as the kind of traditional breath work and meditation tools that we've been offered. So first of all, why would you spend 15 minutes of your life listening to me rant on about the nervous system? Well, because this is knowledge that you can use to change your life. I don't want to be dramatic, but I'm not joking. You live in your nervous system 24/7. You go to work in it, you go on holiday in it, you look after your children in it, you connect with other people in it. All your interactions with the world and also with yourself happen through your nervous system. And yet most of us just completely ignore our nervous systems unless we get to a point where we really can't. For example, we are completely out of control with anxiety or we're on the edge of burnout. You don't have to start paying attention to your nervous system, but there are some huge advantages to doing that. I think one of the main ones is that you will stop seeing things like overwhelm, stuckness, being dissociative, being frozen, as anything to do with laziness or kind of a flaw in your personality. And you'll actually start realizing that you can do something about those things because they are coming from your nervous system. You'll also be able to stop the procrastination, the avoiding things, and also worrying so much about what other people think. And the big one, you'll be able to start actually living your life instead of being stuck in these kind of mental spirals of rumination and feeling bad. You'll stop feeling like you're constantly at the mercy of what happens to you in life and begin to feel like you actually have some control over your responses, especially when life gets intense as fuck. And crucially, you will also have more space for the things that feel really good. For example, joy, connection, and peace. So huge benefits to getting to know this part of you and learning some tools to help you manage it. And what we're talking about here is the autonomic nervous system. So this is the part of your nervous system that contains the sympathetic nervous system, which is your stress response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest response. I want to start by just talking about what nervous system regulation actually is, because I think there is a perception that a regulated nervous system is one that is always calm, and that is not the case. So a regulated nervous system is not meant to be perpetually calm. Your nervous system is supposed to be in motion throughout the day. It's meant to move through both sympathetic and parasympathetic. For example, we need cortisol to get us up in the mornings. A regulated nervous system is one that can return to a state of relative ease and connectedness after something has happened. It's a system that acknowledges something has happened, so we're not ignoring the hard stuff, responds to it, and then settles. The big problem for a lot of us is that we are getting stuck in our stress response and we don't return to that parasympathetic state, and that is when we become dysregulated. Many of us are also in a place where our stress response is being habitually switched on in situations where we don't really need it. For example, if you're being chased by a lion, you really need your stress response. In that situation, your stress response is probably going to save your life. That's what it's for. You don't need your stress response when you open a difficult email. And the only thing that having that level of stress response will do in a situation with a difficult email is create that kind of pounding heart, sweaty palmed, headachy, cloudy-headed feeling of not being able to think clearly, not being able to see clearly, and feeling quite stuck. And when you're in that state, you are not going to be able to respond to whatever it is that was in that message. And that is the big point to note here. When you're in your stress response, you lose access to the part of the brain that has functions like getting perspective on a situation or solving problems, or the part of the brain that would enable you to process the email you've received and write exactly the right response. Those parts of the brain that go offline include the prefrontal cortex. And when they go offline, they do so because blood is flowing to other parts of the body that your body has calculated you need more in that moment. So your arms and your legs, so that you can fight, flight, or freeze. And that is not helpful in the moment because we need the prefrontal cortex. We need the parts of the brain that enable us to get perspective and find solutions. And what I see constantly in coaching and in the people around me often is we just don't know that this is happening inside of us physiologically at the time. And because we don't know that that's what's happening, we're kind of just sitting there with our brains functioning at less than normal capacity because this stress response has been triggered. And yet we're trying to use that not really functioning that well brain to think our way out of a situation, and it just won't happen. That's why when you start using your nervous system in those moments, instead of staying very still and stuck, everything changes. Something that's also worth mentioning here is that this is a massive topic. And it's one where I think we still lack a lot of insight, especially because a lot of the theories that relate to the nervous system, a lot of the research has only been done on male nervous systems. Hormones have a profound impact on nervous system regulation. And in women, that particularly happens through estrogen and progesterone acting on neurotransmitters. Estrogen is neuroprotective, boosting serotonin and dopamine. And when it drops off, for example, right before your period or during perimenopause or menopause, it can cause autonomic dysfunction. A lot of what is communicated as fact about the nervous system doesn't take any of that into account. And I think we're all a little bit in the dark because, until very recently, no one's really bothered to research women's nervous systems. And yet there are obviously some substantial differences between a man's nervous system and a woman's. One thing I think we can all agree on, though, is that it is time to do away with this idea that regulation really only means kind of doing breath work and meditation on a regular basis. This is what I come across as the bulk of kind of regulation advice. And sure, they might work for you. There are benefits to the more calming activities for your nervous system. They do work, but they're not the only things that work. And sometimes we find it quite difficult to do those things because they feel like a restriction or they don't really feel appropriate. And there are actually more dynamic and movement-based ways to regulate your nervous system that actually might be more appropriate to what you're feeling in the moment. There are some situations where any amount of breath work and meditation will not do anything because of what's going on in your body. And in those situations, we do need something more dynamic. Dancing, for example, it reduces cortisol, it boosts feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, and it will help to release stored tension. It can be way more effective in moments of real heightened stress than anything that involves sitting down and breathing. I took up boxing a while ago and fully expected to feel like a sense of release just from kind of expending energy on something. But I didn't expect afterwards to feel so zen. But it turns out that boxing is also a powerful nervous system regulator because it provides a physical outlet for stored stress. It reduces cortisol. It helps bring you into the present. It pulls you out of overthinking. Because you're doing kind of high intensity, regular rhythmic movements and focused on breathing, the autonomic nervous system balances, and that moves you out of a fight, flight, freeze response and into a more regulated state. And then, of course, there's orgasms. Women's nervous systems rely on oxytocin in a way that men's don't. And orgasms are a fantastic source of oxytocin. Orgasms give the body a moment of complete relief. There is a huge drop in cortisol that comes with an orgasm, and obviously you get that big oxytocin hit. They are medicine for our nervous system, and that brings with it a lot of other benefits. For example, you might sleep better after an orgasm. It can feel like a complete system reset. Some people even find that they help with panic attacks. Pleasure in general is hugely regulating for human nervous systems, especially women. It's so good for us. And I think we've done the human race a huge disservice to kind of label pleasure as something shameful or sinful or wasteful. It's been kind of weaponized against us by the parts of society that are so intent on controlling us or making us productive 24/7. And if there's one thing that I recommend you do after listening to this podcast, it is take back pleasure for yourself. Find out what activates the pleasure center in your brain. Then do it often. It doesn't have to be orgasms. There are so many other ways to do it. But if you do that often, if you are regularly bringing pleasure into your life, you'll not only be more regulated, but you're going to feel better too. Because the pleasure center of your brain doesn't just release oxytocin. It also releases serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. Think about how much more capable, decisive, and confident and effective you are when you are full of those happy hormones. Yeah? So why would you deny them to yourself? Why not have more of them and then operate in that kind of more optimized state? Something that is often really overlooked with nervous system regulation is one of the most fundamental elements of it, and that is feeling your feelings and not suppressing them. You can do breathwork and meditation until you are blue in the face. But if you are ignoring or suppressing your emotions, that basic trust that you need to have with your nervous system in order to be regulated just isn't there. Self-trust is the basis of regulation, and if you don't have it, it's hard to be regulated. Your nervous system is a source of data, and if you are not listening to that data, it can cause a hell of a lot of internal tension. Feeling your feelings, honoring your needs, these are way more important for nervous system regulation than finding a random breathwork tool that might temporarily help you. I think it's also really important to notice that often what we're doing with those breathwork tools is, or any other tool like that, is trying to avoid feeling a feeling that you're already having. You're not regulating yourself if you're doing breath work and emotional suppression. You are literally just papering over the cracks, and your nervous system isn't going to allow that for very long. What all this really comes down to is the relationship that you have with you. Once you start to discover how big of an impact your nervous system is having on your daily experience in so many ways, you'll also notice how much you can influence all of that in the right direction by incorporating more regulating experiences into your life on a regular basis, not just when you're stressed. But you've also got to build that underlying foundation of self-trust, awareness of your nervous system, learning about your own emotions, and moving away from any habitual thoughts or behaviors that are trying to get you to kind of suppress or avoid feelings and emotions. All that has to happen if you want to be more regulated. You can't just learn some breath work. It's really not possible to kind of buy a spot on a resilience retreat and hope for the best by doing lots of cold dips and breath work. And I know it sounds like I hate cold dips and breath work, but I do both. I rate them highly, but they are not on their own a solution, and they aren't the only way that you can regulate your nervous system, hence this podcast. And something I have to tackle often as a resilience coach is people presenting to me that this idea of just getting through stuff and gritting your teeth is actually what makes us resilient, or that suppression of what you're feeling, kind of that hard facade of emotionlessness, that is somehow strong. The reality is it's incredibly destabilizing to be trying not to feel what you're already feeling. It takes a lot of energy and attention away from other parts of how you function. And it's hard to not know how to feel some emotions or to not want to feel them. We have to learn these things, how to feel our emotions, how to identify with our emotions, how to regulate our emotions, or our nervous systems will never feel safe. And please know that when you're gritting your teeth and pushing through something, that is not evidence of resilience. It's just basic survival, after which you're probably going to collapse or burn out. Resilience is the mental and nervous system flexibility to be able to navigate yourself through the hard times in a way that actually supports your nervous system and your mind, so that after the hard times pass, you're in a position to be able to thrive or bounce back, if you want to use the classic term. Something I think is also forgotten often is how much of a big role your nervous system has to play in what you can achieve in life, mainly because it will very quickly put the brakes on when you're trying to grow and reach for the things you want if you don't have the capacity for that. So this all comes down to the capacity in your nervous system. Does your nervous system have the capacity to hold your dreams? If it doesn't, you're going to encounter self-sabotage. Here's a really simple way to find out whether that is what's happening for you. Think about your biggest dream for your life right now, whether it involves career, relationships, or something new you want to experience. Now imagine that that thing is going to happen today. How would you feel? Would you be ready? Could you handle it? If you feel resistance or constriction in response to that, or a feeling of not being ready, it's highly likely that your nervous system doesn't currently have the capacity for that bigger version of your life. And when your nervous system doesn't have the capacity for the life that you're reaching towards, it will pull you back from it. It will pull you back into what it considers to be safer territory, which is what you've always done. And that's why we tend to experience things like overwhelm, we freeze, we start excessively worrying about what other people think, we are avoiding, procrastinating, dissociating right at the moments when we really need to not do that stuff. That is your nervous system. If you end up doing those things when you're trying to reach your goals, the issue is not your ability to reach the goals. It's that your nervous system is currently too small for the goals that you're trying to reach. Because so many of us just don't take our nervous systems into account, we often blame ourselves in these situations. You know, we call ourselves lazy or broken, or accuse ourselves of not trying hard enough, not using the right tools, or we hate on ourselves for the self-sabotage. But your nervous system decides what's safe without ever consulting your conscious mind, so it is completely disconnected from your goals. It's using a process called neuroception for this, where it is constantly scanning for tone of voice, facial expression, bodily sensation, past experience, and kind of what's happening between your nervous system and someone else's. And it's doing all of that far faster than your conscious thought. So you might logically want intimacy, for example, but if closeness is once paired with hurt or overwhelm for you, then your system can register danger in the present moment when you try to move towards intimacy. And when it does that, it will instantly override your plan to grow into more intimacy. And to you, that might look like you're trying to be emotionally vulnerable or physically intimate, and suddenly you find yourself freezing, mentally and physically. From the outside, that can look like self-sabotage or being difficult, but on the inside, it's just incredibly confusing and frustrating. The reality is it's just your nervous system protecting you from something that it hasn't yet learned is safe, which it doesn't yet have the capacity for. That's why even good, positive change and being really courageous when you reach towards it can trigger a threat response until you build capacity. In the context of your nervous system, success requires safety. You cannot push forward towards it unless your nervous system is not on fire. And that's because the nervous system will always have the last word here, because survival, which is what your nervous system is geared toward, outranks aspiration, which is your goals and dreams, in the neural hierarchy. And that's why learning kind of tools for regulation and building capacity in your nervous system really will change your life. Whether you're talking about regulation or capacity, nothing to do with your nervous system requires any kind of big dramatic transformation. Repeated experiences of safety or pleasure, of connection, of holding yourself through the hard moments, these are what create the new neural pathways. And over time, the new neural pathways that are building capacity become easier to access than the old ones. And as a result, the new ones become habitual. So what once required effort or self-control to do, such as acknowledging and learning to feel your feelings, for example, reaching for pleasure when you're stressed, or dancing when you want to freeze, starts to feel natural. And that's the point, I think, when regulation really kicks in. The real power of any kind of change with your nervous system is using all of your tools, whatever they are, in the moments where you would normally spiral or numb yourself or just sit and kind of get stuck in your own head, which are all things that are going to escalate your stress response. If instead of doing that, you start using new behaviors that create safety, it will open up a whole new world of resilient coping that you may have thought was not even possible for you. And honestly, sometimes orgasms are a big part of that. I hope that's been an interesting insight into why your nervous system has so much to offer you when it comes to how you walk through your life, and how much more there is to help you regulate than just cold dips, meditation and breath work. If you'd like more like this, then come and find me on Instagram at Alex Resilience Coach, or online at shore-coaching.com. Don't forget to tune in next time for another fantastic guest episode, and make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a thing.